Wow.
Yeah, mail stuff, like an email, mail stuff to them. And people have brought it to such a point that there are virtual communities over the internet where you can go and exchange stuff. And there's one thing that works kind of like a stock, like a stock, and that is the term is a virtual stuff that you can buy. It's a virtual stuff that you can buy on every Sunday, and it's usually priced about 70 to 100 yuan each. And if you want to make money out of it, I mean, you need money to improve your apartment or house, and then to do the landscape changing stuff. So you need funds, and turnip stuff and speculation is.
It's the same crew of South. It's the same. Keep getting mad. It's the same crew of predominantly South African tied together.
There are certain virtual communities, and then you can go
ones over and over.
He told me he bought them horses from a man named Pringle up in Wyoming. Now, what's your name, mister? Disha.
Decades of this shit. It's a fucking joke. People
social aspect is pretty strong there.
And when Limey introduced this game to me, one selling point that really caught my attention was you can link together with your favorite animals. You can keep some animals on your island and be friends with them. And I think that's quite amazing.
Yeah.
What a wonderful world. You can communicate with your animals and spend time with them.
Yeah, animal lover function, that could be one of the many hats she wears. And there's another video game that's been really popular in 2020 and also attracting some controversy as well. And the first time, being the cavewoman I am, when I saw the title of this game, Cyberpunk 2077, I thought it's just the worst internet handle on a social media platform like ever. Until I know some people will be enraged. How quickly I'll say this, because this is actually a really popular video game. What is this about? I checked it out briefly, but it is certainly a lot less peaceful than Animal Crossing, all versions combined.
Yeah, and Cyberpunk 2077, I haven't played this game, but I've seen some of it over the internet, either on WeChat or on Weibo, so it's often talked about over the internet, so it's pretty popular recently, and from the name you guess, I guess cyberpunk. I think it's
brutal.
It's kind of dystopia. So when it comes to cyberpunk, I'm not sure whether you guys are familiar with the term. I think Harrison Ford's movie Blade Runner is a very typical example, a demonstration of the idea of cyberpunk, where Harrison Ford, I think he plays a detective to go and hunt for artificial intelligence or androids.
Wow.
Now,
cyborgs.
So cyberpunk basically is a term for the kind of dystopian world where I think humans and machines that are sort of integrating and some kind of a bionics or symbiotic kind of existence. And so this game, I haven't played this, but according to the intro, is about a fictional place called Night City in California, and is ravaged. The world in 2077 is ravaged nearly beyond repair by multiple wars and climate change. So there goes the word dystopia. And then I guess you get to play, and the player gets to assume the role. I think as I'm not sure. I haven't played this game, but I guess you get to explore the world. I mean, I'm thinking along the line of Fallout game. Designed by Bethesda, the US game studio. So I'm actually looking forward to playing this game. I did a research before the show to see whether the Nintendo Switch will be able to carry this game, but I got so disappointed. I may have to update my hardware in order to play this game, but then again, I don't really have time for this.
Yeah, because you're a new father and you've got so much going on in your life. And maybe another reason why this game is popular is that the visual design is stunning.
Yeah, I've seen the visuals. It's so impressive.
It's almost like movie standard of visual features that's really striking. And also, apparently, the sound design, according to the users say, is really good. And this is one of the best-selling games of 2020. It already sold more than 13 million copies.
But it's controversial. I don't think it's a finished product. I mean, there's been some complaints about how it is almost impossible to play on a PlayStation, and how what was the problem with the PC version? I'm not sure, but it's problematic. That's the least I can say.
Yeah, and some people say like the buffering could take forever. You don't want to play a PPT of a video game. And
Yeah.
that really stings. And I'm like, well, not like I'm ever going to try this thing. But when you look at the popularity of these video games, apparently there are at least two schools of thought, and also they've been deployed, these schools of thought, into their products. One is an example from Nintendo that is like, oh, I want our users to have fun. This is like really easy breezy stuff.
Yeah.
You guys chill and have fun. I would like that. Not like my opinion matters anyhow here. And there's this other school of thought that's pioneered by possibly Sony or Microsoft that is more focused on, we need amazing plots. And we make this thing as elaborate as it looks like a movie and create this immersive experience for our users. What do you think about the future when it comes to, this is a lot of crystal balling. Sorry, guys, but we're doing a show here. So, without making yourself sound like fools, what do you think about the future when it comes to popular video games? Which path is going to go further, or maybe both? What do you think?
I think there are plenty of standards that you can use to evaluate a game. When it comes to Nintendo Switch and the games that it carries, I sense that there is a tendency to make family-friendly games. When you look at Animal Crossing New Horizon, and also I think the most popular game on the platform, and that is the Zelda, and you always get the sense that there's no blood and gore. There's no sense of urgency. I mean, you don't have to be there for like 5 to 6 hours a day. I mean, that kind of thing. You don't have to be there.
Right.
I mean, you can afford to maybe perhaps have about half an hour there and just get a taste of it, and that'll be it. I mean, there's no sense of urgency. Whereas I think when it comes to this Cyberpunk and other similar games, like the one I love so much, the Fallout series, and the Skyrim series. Oh, it's not the Elder Scrolls series. I mean, it's all about using the best technology, the best hardware to create the most immersive experience, to transport you to ancient times or to a dystopia. And so, it's entirely different. I mean, the game design, hardware. So it's going down different approaches. And I'm not sure I'm the best guy to make the comparison and come up with the decision which is the best, because there's always a market for each.
Yeah, I think the future will definitely see the involvement of modern technologies like AR and VR that will give you an extraordinary immersive experience. I remember when I was a student, my favorite genre of games was detective games, or this similar to escape room games. Like you just being locked up in a room and you have to find all the hidden objects and gather all the clues and to solve the problems and open the door and to enter the next chamber. I think with this kind of like support of technologies, you can really feel you are in the game. You can have a virtual exploration of the game. But also I think in the future we will see these developers will definitely give more priority to female gamers, because now we have seen female gamers in the country account for more than a quarter of the Chinese e-gaming market. And how can you catch attention and fulfill the needs of female gamers? I think that's another market to be tapped into, because female gamers may have a different preference than male gamers. They may love some romantic and that kind of really chill but quite entertaining games. So it gives smaller game developers a chance to shine. And probably in the future, we can see the game market is not only being monopoly like by the big developers, but give some small and medium-sized game developers a time to show their talents.
Great point. Great point.
And also just you guys talked about the animal in the island without repeating the title of the game too many times. And also a couple of years ago, the frog on your mobile phone game. Yeah, these are things that attracted a lot of female gamers too. And when you look at the Chinese mobile game industry, it soared by an estimation of 33% year on year. And also we're seeing that the Asian Pacific area has become the biggest gamer place in the world. It's no longer North America. So it's really interesting to see how this industry changes globally and also here in China. You're listening to Roundtable. Coming up next, we're going to talk about video call fatigue. Apparently, it's a real thing. Stay tuned to find out more on that.
Looking for passion? How about fiery debate? Want to hear about current events in China from different perspectives? Then tune in to Round 2, where East meets West. Understanding is the goal.
It's the hour of Roundtable with myself, He Yang, Lai Ming, and Huang Shen in the studio. Your screen freezes. There's a weird echo. A dozen heads stare at you. There are the work huddles, the one-on-one meetings, and then once you're done for the day, the hangouts with friends and family, all happening online via video chat. Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit, folks around the world are on video calls more than ever before, and many are finding it exhausting, and there's a term for it. It's one of the examples when a company's name is attached to the phrase Zoom fatigue or video call fatigue. Why is it exactly that is tiring us out?
Well, this is because we have had so many live video call sessions, I guess. And I'm not sure about you guys. I keep using this phrase. But when you're making video calls, do you pay extra attention to how you look in the small window? Because I found myself compelled to keep staring at myself to make sure I have the best angle, to make sure I was maintaining eye contact, you know? You know when you're attending a conference for real, in real person, you pay attention to perhaps the one that's in charge, maybe the boss. And so as long as he or she's not staring at you, you might feel that you have some kind of liberty to sort of to wander off.
Yeah.
You know, you find it more excusable. But whereas when it comes to video conferences, you don't know who's looking. So you can't afford to you know, mind your own business. You have to maintain that semblance of attention to what's going on at the meeting, and also you got to make sure that you're not showing your double jaw or something.
What do you think, Huang Shen?
Yeah, I just after Lightning pointed out, I figured out whenever I'm on video calls, right, I tend to spend 30% of the time looking at the person who's on the screen on the other side, but probably I will pay 70% of the time to look at myself. And sometimes I would just like changing like the angles of how I hold my camera or my smartphones, and in this way I can find my best angle. Sometimes my mom would complain, can you stop like moving your cameras? It just so dizzy feels like. And for this video calls, I still prefer to do video calls rather than just by phone calls. I like to see the other person's face because I can tell from the minor like gestures or the facial expressions, then I think we can communicate better. But in this case, people may just tired of Zoom conference calls instead of like a video calls.
Interesting point. Although experts have listed a few factors to possibly contribute and explain why it's so exhausting with video calls, especially having way too many of them. One is that eye contact is really important and complex in conversation. Like right now we're sitting in one room and also we're wearing face masks. Still we're being so good at it, and then I can see through like Liming's big eyes that he's having a great time and he has something else to say. And With the video call, though, especially when you've got a conference going on, like 20 or 12 little windows, you don't have that eye contact with people. Yeah. And it's almost like you're giving a speech or something like that. So that's one thing that takes the emotional aspect out of it. And also, apparently, according to experts, one of the solutions to this is, switching to traditional calls. And Huangshan is certainly not a fan. What about you, Lai Ming, when we talk about solutions to Zoom fatigue?
That's a very good question. If I want to show my son to my own parents, I would definitely go for video calls. But if it's about work, I guess, if it's not really that important, yeah, I would definitely welcome a simple phone call.
And the phone call for the millennial generation and those younger, they're like, what is that? Unless it's like there's a funeral that you have to attend, you don't make the phone call. Ooh, bad. You're listening to Roundtable, and we'll see you again on the show. Bye, guys. How are you? What's on your mind? Let's have a heart-to-heart on Roundtable. Ask us anything. We'll help you answer it. Send a voice memo to...
We switched over to Chinese.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Oh, so the 10 minutes off.
Who sold them to you? Said his name was Larry. Hawk-faced fellow. Yeah.
Larry.
16号公布的数据显示，1月15号0时至24时，中国内地报告新。
By the end of Friday, there were 643 locally transmitted confirmed cases and 2 imported cases being treated in hospitals in Hebei, mostly in Shijiazhuang and Nangong, a county-level city under Xintai City. Beijing has required inbound travelers to undergo health monitoring for 7 additional days, following 21 days of medical observation. Recently, there have been cases in cities across China in which inbound travelers were confirmed as COVID-19 patients after 14 days of isolated observation, which led to a rebound in indigenous cases. In response, Beijing earlier this month extended the COVID-19 observation period for inbound travelers to 21 days following sporadic locally transmitted cases. The Chinese mainland on Friday reported 130 newly confirmed COVID-19 cases. New cases included 115 local infections, with the rest arriving from outside the mainland. Of the locally transmitted cases, 90 were reported in Hebei, 23 in Heilongjiang, and 2 in Beijing. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched a nationwide vaccination drive on Saturday to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. He has urged people to make sure they receive both shots of the vaccine, adding that it's essential for them to continue wearing face masks and keep following coronavirus restrictions after receiving their first dose. Modi says the country will vaccinate 30 million people in the first phase of the campaign, and the second phase will bring the number up to 300 million. The largest vaccine center in the United States was launched at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles County on Friday, as the metropolitan area is about to hit the grim milestone of 1 million COVID-19 cases this weekend. Dodger Stadium used to be one of the largest COVID-19 testing sites in the country. It eventually will have the capacity to vaccinate 12,000 people per day. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for far greater solidarity in his video message on the 2 millionth death from the COVID-19 pandemic. The UN chief said the world has reached a heart-wrenching milestone, with 2 million lives claimed by the pandemic. Guterres warned the deadly impact of COVID-19 has been made worse by the absence of a global coordinated effort. More than 600,000 health workers in Turkey have received their first doses of COVID-19 shots developed by China's Sinovac. Turkey has reported over 2.3 million COVID-19 infections.
Yes, today. Why don't you get L&M? Because L&M's got everything.
This is it. L&M filters. L&M.
It was launched at Dodger Stadium variant of the COVID-19. The Brazilian Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, the largest medical research United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for far greater solidarity in his video message on the 2 millionth death from the COVID-19 pandemic. The UN chief said the world has reached a heart-wrenching milestone, with 2 million lives claimed by the pandemic. Guterres warned the deadly impact of COVID-19 has been made worse by the absence of a global coordinated effort. More than 600,000 health workers in Turkey have received their first doses of COVID-19 shots developed by China's Sinovac. Turkey has reported over 2.3 million COVID-19 infections and 23,000 deaths. The country started mass vaccination for COVID-19 on January 14th after the authorities approved the emergency use of the Chinese vaccine. The Brazilian Health Ministry has confirmed the country's first case of reinfection with a new variant of the COVID-19. The Brazilian Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, the largest medical research center in Latin America, on January 12th identified a new variant of the COVID-19 in a 29-year-old woman with mild symptoms of the disease. The woman was diagnosed with the disease for the first time on March 24th, and 9 months later, on December 30th, she tested positive again. So far, more than 8.3 million people in Brazil have tested positive for COVID-19. The disease has killed over 207,000 people in the country. The U.S. National Rifle Association said it has filed for bankruptcy protection, unveiling its plan to move from New York to the state of Texas.
There was no point testing anybody.
That fellow dead, Mr. Dillon. You were none at all.
Yeah.
Who are you? I've never seen him before.
Stand away from the door, Chester. It's Marshal Dillon, Deisha. Come on out of there.
I can't move.
Sounds like he's been hit.
Then slide your gun across the floor and let...
Roses and
6 p.m. on Saturday. This is the last show.
Model last week. Apple, Google, and Amazon have all taken steps to clamp down on Parler, an alt-tech social media platform used by many of Trump's most fervent right-wing supporters. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey explained the company's rationale in a series of tweets, saying the ban was the right decision, but he also admitted that it sets a dangerous precedent, the power of an individual or corporation has over a part of the global public conversation. Have tech companies gone too far in banning Trump? And whose job is it to define and enforce what is beyond the boundaries of free speech? For more, we're now happy to be joined by Helge Zepp-LaRouche, founder of the Schiller Institute, is a Germany-based political and economic think tank. Mario Cavolo, founder and CEO of M Communications Group. He's also a senior fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. And also we have Mr. Chen Weihua, China Daily's EU Bureau Chief based in Brussels. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello, good day.
Good evening.
Professor LaRouche, may I start with you? Do you think Twitter and Facebook and other social media platforms have made the right decision in banning Donald Trump?
Minor injuries after being hit by a car.
Oh no, I think this is an extremely dangerous development. I would call it an earthquake. The spokesman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, called it a nuclear bomb. The Mexican president Obrador called it, made it equal to the Holy Inquisition, creating an office of censorship. The French finance minister, Le Maire, spoke of a digital oligarchy. I think this is an incredible attack on the right for free speech, and it doesn't mean you have to agree with President Trump or not, but, is a very dangerous development and should absolutely be countered by all means.
Following a violation in campaign spending during the 2018 municipal election, the board had been representation since September.
To some extent. I mean,
Still to come on 680 News, we'll check the price at the post. 680 News time, 509.
Personally, I feel it should be closed a long time ago because, I also covered the WHO press conference if the disinformation from Trump's account, which has like 88 million followers, is the disinformation not there, I think the U.S. pandemic response would be much more effective. All the hate speech, I mean, regarding his rhetoric on Twitter regarding China, I would call the hate speech, racist rhetoric that should be banned a long time ago. But the question I have is, why now? I mean, because obviously for U.S. it's the concern in the upcoming inauguration of the Biden administration, possible violence. But to me, there was a lot of dangerous disinformation campaign on Trump's account, and so it should be dealt with. I mean, it's a really harmful account.
But Mr. Chen, what do you think of what just now Dr. LaRouche mentioned about the words used by French economy and finance minister that compares these tech giants as digital oligarchies?
Well, I agree. I mean, this is really uncharted territory because no one before would think these tech giants would be so powerful. They're not just powerful in the U.S., they're powerful all over the world. I mean, we saw the role they played in so-called color revolution, Arab Spring, everywhere, in coup, all kinds of political major issues, or in wars and terrorism, extremist activities. So I think they should be regulated. I mean, so this is, but by whom and how? This is something to be discussed and solved, I would say.
Yes, who will be there to regulate these big tech companies? We'll discuss in a short while. But Mr. Carollo, what's your thought on Twitter's decision to ban Donald Trump? Do you think that's a right step?
In the current case of exactly and specifically what happened, if they had the correct reason and purpose for banning an account, that's okay. Meaning, now let the discussion go as to whether or not it was appropriate. Okay, if that's an ongoing discussion, that can be an ongoing discussion. Let me skip. I'm skipping to the reality of, should they be able to ban anyone at all? And if they are able to ban anyone at all, which they should be able to, then what would be the reasons? And I'm going to take it back down to the smaller level and simply say, here in China, we have something called WeChat. We have Weixin. And if you run a group in WeChat, you are the administrator, and it's a small group. You might only have 30 people in it. And you'll respond, and you tell everybody, hi, folks, this is a group about, Italian food. Oh, great. And then we're here to talk about Italian food. Please be polite. And if you have something harsh to say about Italian food, say it in it. Okay, I think Italian food tastes terrible. Okay, fine. But you don't start attacking Italians. You don't start speaking in a hateful, rude, uncivilized, and if you do, I will run the group. And that's what happens.
Yes, but Mr. Carollo, criticizing Italian food is not against the law, but inciting violence is a different thing, right?
Precisely my meaning. He went over the line, and but then, as Wei Hua mentioned, we can argue that
really
he went over the line. Okay, fine. So Twitter finally banned him, but then that immediately brings up the other question, which is, well, then this should have happened a long time ago, because what has happened here is it's horrifying. Don't get me wrong. I was not an Obama fan, right? I'm not a fan of leftist liberal democracies. I'm a very conservative guy. So overall, I think that the direction of America is horrible for the last 20 years, and most people do. However, I'm glad Obama spoke in a decent and diplomatic way, even if I hated what he said, but he wasn't rude. He didn't lower the standard of decency and civility in the whole country, which is what Donald Trump did. He turned everybody into a bunch of white trash, horrible talking people without any sense of politeness and civility. And he made it acceptable. And that's an incredible thing for a president to have done. And no, it's not okay.
So Dr. LaRouche, you don't think Trump has went over the line in making those hate speech on his Twitter account, and don't you think that Twitter should have the right to take them down?
Well, I mean, I think that there are two levels to this. You know, one is that one obviously can disagree with the style of President Trump and, you know, even his political convictions. But I think the discussion so far overlooks the fact that we are looking at an absolute coup by the big tech Silicon Valley firms, which, by the way, are part of the military-industrial complex in the United States. And you cannot separate what the present policies of these forces are against Russia, against China. They are the people behind the color revolution, as somebody said earlier correctly. And when they are now basically trying to create a precedent where they are not only silencing the elected president of the United States, they have amassed an amount of power which goes way beyond anything in history ever. And I think people should really understand that no matter what the political policy is of President Trump, if you allow these big tech companies as part of the, you know, what people call generally the deep state or the military-industrial complex, if you allow them to censor people, and they have not done it only against Trump, but they started to do it against a lot of other people, this is creating a dictatorship, which I think, you know, the words of the French finance minister, Le Maire, digital oligarchy, is in my view, an understatement. And I think the Mexican President Obrador, comparing it to the Holy Inquisition, is much more adequate, because I think people have to differentiate between if they like Trump or not and what this phenomena is. It's a very dangerous development, and I think I can only put on the alarm bells for the whole world public about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's why Jack Dorsey would say that's a dangerous precedent, right? So, Mr. Chen, this, I mean, certainly raises the question about the limits of free speech in the internet era. So, in your view, do you think the banning of Donald Trump's social media account is a violation of the right to the freedom of speech?
Well, I think there is something called, I would say, you say the right and freedom of speech, but is a freedom of hate speech? No. I mean, where I'm only in Brussels, in Europe, for 2 years. I know different countries. I mean, because of the Second World War experience, I mean, different countries from Germany to Denmark to others have different laws regarding, hate speech. So, I mean, personally, I think hate speech should be banned, should be restricted. So in that sense, I think, as we mentioned earlier, that Donald Trump's social media account is full of such hate and racist speech. So in that sense, I don't think it's a violation. And he is not, just remember, he is not me, anyone, ordinary people. He is the president of the United States and 88 million followers. So that's, I think it deserves a special treatment in this sense.
Okay, and then, and actually, narrowly speaking, this is not a violation of the First Amendment, because the First Amendment limits only the government actors and does not apply to decisions made by private companies. But Mr. Cavallo, if we think of the power of these big tech companies and their impact of our daily communications, do you think they are actually acting like a state?
Well, Professor Lavache brings up the right point that, we're talking about two separate things here. If this is done, if the censorship, if the blocking and banning is censorship, right? So if it's done as a coup, by the digital oligarchy, which I agree with her, if it's done with that purpose in mind, we are in a lot of trouble, and it is very dangerous, because they're going to extend those tentacles like an octopus out to whatever they feel like, and that has to be stopped. If you say to me, the state chooses to censor my speech, I'm satisfied with that. What? Only if you tell me what is the purpose. Mm-hmm. And the purpose is to create and provide to all individual people within a society within a particular space, like a society or a giant platform that we're all conversing together on, everyone must be entitled equally to a decent civil environment. And therefore, we have these rules. You're not allowed, you shouldn't say this, you shouldn't say that. You should be polite like your mother taught you. And if you're, you know, and if not, we're going to boot you off. But that has to apply equally to everyone. If we are, and I'm also concerned we are, as the professor said, if we're talking about where these big tech oligarchies are doing this for other purposes and to favor a certain political side, left or right or whatever it is, absolutely, we're in a lot of trouble, and it's an enormous problem.
Right, and Mr. Cavallo, I mean, the purpose is, of course, very important here, but do you think, do you got the feeling that these big tech companies are somehow ideologically biased?
The answer up till now appears to be a resounding yes. Does anybody else on the panel disagree?
I guess no.
With you totally, actually. I mean, I spent a year at Stanford, which is really where the cradle of many Silicon Valley sort of founders or, you know, employees. I mean, they're overwhelmingly, I attended actually 2004, they campaigned for John Kerry, the Democrats. They donated money, I mean, overwhelmingly towards the Democrats. I mean, Stanford is literally blue. So only the Hoover institution inside is sort of conservative. So in that sense, I agree with you. I mean, I think you mentioned, Zhao Ying mentioned Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. I mean, he contributed to the Democrats. Mark Zuckerberg is obviously, I mean, we can tell. I mean, so in that sense, I think they are actually the bigger ones.
Dr. LaRouche, your thought on this?
Well, I think, you know, if you look at what happened with 9/11, 9/11 is still being investigated, you know, what was really behind it. You know, there are suspicions that it included rogue elements of the U.S. military, because otherwise, you know, there was no way how this could have happened. That was the pretext for the Patriots Act. The Patriots Act started the surveillance, which Edward Snowden revealed, you know, the NSA spying on the whole world, collecting data. Just everything you do electronically is being collected, and there are many people who object to that. They even surveyed the smartphone of Chancellor Merkel, which was a big scandal, but people have forgotten about that. So this is now a new phase in the same effort to establish dictatorship. And you know, I think the fact that the big tech private firms should, you know, decide what is allowed to be said and what not allowed to be said. I mean, this is a new phenomena. I agree, this is uncharted waters, but it's also not much different than, you know, the total opinion control of Goebbels and, you know, Big Brother watching you, the whole, if you look at the Orwell, Animal Farm, or all these scenarios, you know, I think this is really dangerous. I think this is and the reason, by the way, you know, why there was such an opposition against Huawei and the G5 technology of China is because that interfered with the ability of exactly these big tech silicon firms to do the kind of worldwide control they are now trying to engage. This is the reason why they fight against Huawei.
Yes, thank you, Dr. LaRouche, for mentioning that. That's exactly right. But Huawei was no one's fighting. No, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping in. No one's fighting. They're not fighting against Huawei because Huawei is bad. They're fighting against Huawei because Huawei wouldn't cooperate with allowing them to also, like all the other suppliers, put in the backdoor equipment so that they could spy on everybody. So of course Huawei is not going to agree to that as a Chinese company, and that's why they're attacking Huawei. It's a very, very interesting point.
Right, and Mr. Cavallo, I guess we all agree that these big tech companies, they are not ideologically neutral. So do you feel that sometimes they have an even bigger power today than the government actors in terms of shaping our discussions and values and having a bigger impact on politics? Like if we think about how Twitter reacted to the riots in Hong Kong back in 2019, how those posts supporting Hong Kong police were taken down by the platform.
Well, that's exactly right, and this is this is in line with Dr. LaBouche's comments that, and the EU is the one that is jumping on them and saying, we're not going to allow you to become bigger than the state, bigger than the government and the society itself, and that's the danger here.
Well, I guess Mr. Cavallo will call you back in a short while. Dr. LaBouche, actually, the silencing of Donald Trump on social media platforms have led to some renewed calls from both political parties to amend or revoke the Section 230. I mean, the law gives the web platforms the power to moderate user content, but also shields them from liability for user content they choose not to. I'd like to know what is your thought about Section 230, and do you think it's time to repeal that law?
Well, I think that this whole development, including the use of algorithms to predict what people will do, I mean, this has reached a point where, you know, I think we need to really have a very serious discussion about how to protect the civil rights of people, how to protect the right of business. But I think that, you know, this has grown into a direction which I can only say that we have to have an absolute rethinking of this whole area, and you know, new legislation has to be made to protect the population, to protect the nations, to protect the business.
Mr. Chen, do you agree?
I think, you know, I have to say that we all agree that the big tech companies are too powerful. I mean, how we talk about you know, the monopoly. I agree. I mean, they are monopoly. They're big trouble. So I mean, like, who gives them the power to label my account as a state affiliate media, you know, account, and not labeling even Voice of America journalist or Radio Free Asia or those accounts. Anyway, I mean, it's a big trouble that they are too powerful. I mean, I think we agree on that. I agree on that. I think the Section 230 should be, I mean, amended, or, you know, in certain way. I mean, it should be regulated. I mean, in my mind, you know, I said earlier, all these hate speech, the content. I mean, who should? I mean, I don't think tech companies should be the one who regulate. I mean, should it be either the government or more industrial society, or, you know, and, you know, civil society fully participation. That should be necessary, I mean, to deal with this really new phenomenon. I mean, this never happened even 20 years ago, I think.
Mm-hmm. So Mr. Cavallo, would you like to finish on what you just said, and also what do you think might be the potential amendments to Section 230?
Yes, as I was saying, it was the EU that has taken the rein in pushing back on all of this with the controls over rejecting these problems. I'm trying to remember the exact story, but it was just a few months earlier where the EU rejected some kind of U.S. Because the U.S. Regulations didn't fit. They had rejected some kind of an agreement that was a real pushback on the U.S. situation. I'm sorry, I forget the details, but it indicated again, yes, the EU is leading the charge against not allowing these big tech companies to become too powerful, and absolutely that's a good thing. As to what the amendments should be, I'm off the top of my head, I'm going to say I'm not thinking of anything particular right now, and let me push it over to Dr. LaBouche, maybe for maybe her thoughts on that.
Yeah, Dr. LaBouche, your thought on this? And actually, we know that the EU has just unveiled the new laws to regulate these big tech companies, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. What are the two laws mainly about, and do you think the Europe can take the lead in shaping the rules regarding these platforms?
Well, I think, Europe for sure has a more critical view, and this act, the Digital Service Act, is, for sure curb these developments. But I think, I think we need a very fundamental discussion. What should be the principles of how society governs itself? How should we, in the beginning of the United States, in the Federalist Papers, there was a discussion, how can the government be organized in such a way to guarantee the long-time survivability and functioning of government. And I think this is not only a question for inside every state, but it's also very important for the relations among states, because, I think the proposal by President Xi Jinping for to define the community, the shared community for the one future of humanity. I'm probably not saying it in the right way right now, but the idea that you have to have principles which put the interest of humanity as the one first, and subsume any national interest in accordance to that interest of humanity as a whole. I think you have to have very basic principles when you discuss such things like how to control modern technologies. I mean, the technological progress will always happen. That's the nature of man, that we will be able to discover new laws of the physical universe. There will be always new technological developments. But what needs to go along with that is the development of the character, the development of the morality.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you, but we have to take a short break here. Coming back, we'll continue our discussion.
Hello, this is Michael Drum. Greetings from Los Angeles of the Golden State of California. Thank you today for making me part of your team. I truly enjoyed the debates we had and look forward to many more in the years to come.
Hello, I'm Joya Cid, First Secretary of the Embassy of Chile to China. It's been an honor taking part on your show and telling you about the relationship between Chile and China. Wishing you all the best.
In-depth analysis, valuable insights, expert views, presented by an award-winning team. Today, keeping you well-informed, up-to-date, and ahead of the news.
Hello everyone, this is Zoon Ahmed Khan, journalist from Pakistan, currently based in Tsinghua University. World Today is an excellent initiative to discuss current affairs by including experts from across the globe. I've always enjoyed our thought-provoking discussions and wish the team even more success and impact in the future.
I am Deng Wang, China analyst from the Economist Intelligence Unit. Today is a very fun program. It is a place you hear interesting people discuss global events, social trends, and what is happening in China and in the rest of the world. So friends around the world, hope you can join us. You're listening to World Today. I'm Zhao Ying. We are talking this hour about the deplatforming of Donald Trump and the limits of free speech in the internet era. Joining our discussion today, Helge Zepp LaRouche, founder of the Schiller Institute, a Germany-based political and economic think tank. Mario Cavallo, founder and CEO of M Communications Group. He's also a senior fellow with the Center for China and Globalization, and Chen Weihua, China Daily EU Bureau Chief based in Brussels. Well, Mr. Chen, just now you said that we cannot rely on these big tech companies to monitor themselves. But just now, Dr. LaBrouche also mentioned about the basic principles. Do you think what do you think is the basic problem here? Because if we rely on the governments to make the rules, governments can also make rules based on their own ideologies, right?
I would, continue on what actually Helga just talked about. You mentioned about EU's approach. Since I think it's a very good approach. Actually, I got here in 2018, about 2 years ago, when EU started to implement this regulation called the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. And now they, just last month they introduced this 2 new acts, which is an update of the very old called e-commerce directive. So I think EU is very ambitious. EU leaders always talk about they want to be the leader of the rule makers. Even they regret. They are not the owner of the big tech companies, because the U.S. companies, they even we know they're Chinese companies. So EU very much in the next step want also to cultivate their own big tech companies. They hope, obviously they're very ambitious, but they are certainly very big in regulation, in this regard. But this is what we argued, previously. This should be regulated. My argument at least, because this is uncharted territory. They should, this big powerful tech company should come with responsibility. Same as Donald Trump's Twitter account. He has a responsibility. It's not just about what we call the freedom of speech. You can say whatever you want. So I think EU has made a very good test. So I think in the next step, probably for I don't know. EU, China, US, the G20. United Nations, even. A lot of to be involved. This is an international issue for me.
Right, this is an international issue. So, Mr. Cavallo, the EU can make its rules. The United States can make its own rules, and China can make the rules. But do you think this can really provide a way out? Because these are international companies, and this is about global public communication.
And the answer is, unfortunately, it's not going to be that simple, but it should be. Let's take a couple examples. And here's a quick story about what happened to Facebook back in, I think it was 2007 or 8. Xinjiang, East Turkmenistan terrorist groups were on Facebook and using Facebook to coordinate. They ended up slaughtering over 200 innocent civilians out in Xinjiang in the terrorist attacks. And China said, whoa, Facebook, excuse me, but these people who are murdering people in our country, they're using your platform. Delete them, block them, don't let them do that. And Facebook said, no, sorry, it's not our job to do that. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And so this is in fact the true story of why China then banned Facebook. YouTube and Google, they're not really banned in China. They just choose not to do business here. 1 million companies in China do business in China. Foreign companies do business in China. Why? Because they're willing to follow Chinese law and they're here doing business. But Google and YouTube choose not to. But in the case of Facebook, they really truly were banned. And this is why. So they arbitrarily choose this kind of information. As the Hong Kong riots are another really good example. You have people championing setting people on fire. No one condemning that. Facebook and other social media. They didn't say anything. They didn't ban anybody. Well, obviously, it's a double standard.
Yeah, Mr. Cavallo, do you think social media platforms? Do you think they are postman or publisher?
Oh wow! So are they just? And the answer is that if they are how do I say this? It doesn't matter. Either way, they are, like I said, I'm responsible. If I have a group and I allow 1,000, if I have a smaller group, if you really want to get a clear answer on this, just take it down to a smaller example. I have a business called Facebook, and it has 1,000 people, and it's a platform of people who can talk to each other. And my rules are, you can do and say anything you want. No, absolutely Absolutely not. You cannot do and say anything you want in a decent, civilized society. You cannot go into the theater and say, fire, fire. It's against the law, because you are not allowed to destabilize the theater and the society. It's a crime. It's a crime against humanity, against people, against civility, against society. So whether your group has 1,000 people in it or 1 billion people in it, that rule still applies, but it has to apply equally, and it isn't, and that's a big problem.
Okay. Well, Dr. Bush, do you feel the problem is that sometimes these big tech companies, they are too big, that they are monopolizing the online communications, and do you feel it is time that we should break them up?
Well, I think that, you know, they are basically too big. I don't know how you would go about it to break them up, but I think there must be regulations where, you know, I think one has to recognize the nature of what they are. I mean, the whole internet came from the military. The way how the violent video games were developed was part of a training program to increase the killer ratio of the soldiers, because they found that in World War II, only 10% or 15% of all soldiers were willing to shoot at the opposing army, because people have a natural impulse not to shoot on human beings. So these video games were developed to increase the military, the willingness of the soldiers to shoot. And then later it became a so-called game. A lot of what has developed from the internet has a military background, and I think there needs to be a thorough analysis of what this is. And I said earlier that the big tech silicon firms are part of the US military-industrial complex, with everything that implies. So there must be first an analysis of what we are dealing with, and then you can find an appropriate approach how to make it useful for society.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Chen, do you think we should break up those big tech companies? Do you think that's going to solve the problem if there are more competitions?
I would favor more sort of, I mentioned earlier, more regulations, better regulation. I think there is no really regulation. I mean, I mentioned the EU made a move. I mean, about the data privacy. I mean, I feel here, I mean, in Brussels, I lived in Europe, in US, in China, here, and you feel really every website sort of you open, there's an alert. I mean, so they're really very strict, I would say, data protection, privacy issues, a big concern here about fair competition by this big tech company, I mean, towards smaller businesses. I mean, Amazon, I mean, this is really the major issue when EU released this so-called Digital Market Act. So I think better regulation is what I favor for. You could, you know, not let those extremists, I mean, terrorist organization, hate speech, racist rhetorics proliferate. I mean, because this is, you cannot, as you earlier mentioned, the publisher. I don't think you can treat it as a publisher in the traditional sense, like China, they a newspaper, because we only have so many people. It's relatively easy to be a gatekeeper. When you have not millions, hundreds of millions of people on the platform, you cannot do that literally. You know, as a gatekeeper, as I worked as a copy editor, you know, being responsible for every copy. But I think there needs to be some kind of the function, you know, to wipe out the very extremist elements. That's right.
Right. But Mr. Cavallo, do you feel that sometimes the role of social media have been exaggerated? Because I mean, there are terrorist attacks, there are extremist activities long before there are social media, right? And the U.S. has a long history of right-wing violence. So how big a role do you think social media has really played in amplifying extremism?
The answer is the social media amplifies everything. Social media doesn't just amplify right-wing extremism. Social media also amplifies left-wing extremism. And so we see violence on the left. It was all summer long with respect to, like, for example, the Black Lives movement riots and other Antifa riots. Most of those are left side, and there's right side, and then there's riots and violent people there. So no matter what people believe, okay, you believe what you believe. You know, you're more open and progressive. You think abortion's okay. I'm more conservative and Christian. I don't think abortion is okay. Okay, fine. But either way, violence is not okay. And so, yes, the social media, as the example I mentioned earlier, they can't allow this. They cannot allow the fostering of hate and violence. Back to the same example again. You know, we self-censor all the time, don't we? It's kind of the final thought I was thinking about for today. We self-censor every single day. Depending on where we are and what we're doing, we behave differently. We self-censor, and we do it out of a sense of decency and civility to the people around us. And shouldn't it be the same when we're on a platform communicating? It's no different.
Well, I mean, Mr. Cavallo, they can organize a protest online. They can organize that offline. Do you think Twitter can have the ability to prevent the attack of the Capitol riots last week from happening?
Well, no. I mean, not very. They don't have a full ability to control. No. I mean, so for example, Twitter has a responsibility to notice these things and to make an effort and to have its rules that says, no, you can't use our platform to organize a violent war, right? Okay, but and get off our platform, and then of course those people can still use cell phones and call each other. I mean, people can still communicate, right? So the answer is there's a limit to their ability to influence whether or not these things happen, and they do have a responsibility. So and that's your question, right? Are they just a postman or a publisher? Do they have any responsibility at all? And the answer is, my answer is, they absolutely have a responsibility in what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Dr. LaRouche, what's your thought on this? I mean, how big a role has social media really played in amplifying extremism?
Well, they have clearly a big role, but I think we should not forget that in the United States, the War of Independence occurred, the Civil War occurred. You had the real root of this right-wing phenomena is in the Confederacy, the people who had the slave holding farms. They were allied with the British Empire in the war against the Union in the Civil War. And if you think about the amount of violence which occurred, for example, in that context, okay, it's all amplified, but I don't think it goes. I think we need to think what is the cause of all of this. And in the United States, the problem is that the American Republic was founded for the common good, which was expressed in the American Constitution. The preamble of the Constitution says, that the entire purpose of the state is the common good, not only of this generation, but also of future generations. And the problem is that that republic is in danger. What we have seen in the recent period is that the values of the British Empire, against which the American Revolution was made in the first place, have taken over and given rise to the idea that the world should be ruled as an unipolar world based on the special relationship between the United States and Great Britain. And that has violated the common good of the ordinary people. And that is, in my view, the cause why this right-wing and left-wing extremism has risen, because you have a lot of people who feel that the government or the institutions are not taking care of their well-being and interest. So I think the solution has to be to find a way to go back to the original principles of the American Republic. And, as Benjamin Franklin said, I have given you a republic. It's up to you to keep it. And I think that is the deeper fight going on in the United States right now. and naturally the social media amplify one thing or the other. But I think one should not only look at the social media because they're in a certain sense only a technology. You have to address the basic issues at stake.
Right, Mr. Chen, your thought on this?
Well, I actually, agree to some extent. I would say, because the social media obviously is, responsible in the sense that, if you say watch a certain program on YouTube, the next day you open it, you find it recommended 10 other similar programs for you. So it means that someone opened maybe a terrorist content issue, and the next day you will be flooded with terrorist content programs. In that sense, I think should be avoided, in this sense. But the other way is this is not really, the root cause. Social media is responsible to some extent, but the root cause is always elsewhere. It's a much bigger root cause, I would say, the social political dimensions.
Right. The root causes is always elsewhere. I agree. And Mr. Cavallo, just now, Mr. Chen also mentioned about the algorithms that can determine what people are likely to see. And there's a growing concern that they have been tilted towards promoting these extremist content instead of promoting the exchange of ideas beyond the echo chamber. Do you think this is determined by the nature, the profit-driven nature of these social media platforms?
From my best recollection over the years, there's been several cases where it's been proven, right, where they sold the data in extremely outrageous and unbelievable circumstances where they were just profiteering on data. And this is quite disgraceful, and there's no interest in humanity. There's only an interest in shareholder profits. And we extend that out to how and why the real root problem underlying all of the current problems of the decline of Western civilization is that how the wealthy and powerful hijacked America and how the wealthy and powerful hijack capitalism. They've literally, taken all the money, and this is clear that the big tech folks are part of it. And you say, well, big tech has a problem, Facebook has this problem or that problem, and it would be really expensive to hire so many people. Excuse me, you have the founder of a company that's worth more money than they ever should have a right to be allowed to be worth, over $100 billion. People must understand that even if you're only worth $750 million, you're already worth an amount of money that is unfathomable. The human being cannot cognitively understand how rich you are if you're worth even less than $1 billion, let alone $100 billion. So to have an individual who's worth $100 billion, and yet at the same time, that individual's social media company says things like, oh, it's too expensive to do this or that. It's just a bunch of baloney. It's just a bunch of baloney. So yes, they're selfish. They're interested in shareholders. This is the problem of the wealthy and powerful and Wall Street and corporatists taking over America and capitalism. It's Ayn Rand's mutant capitalism, and it's ruining the world. There's no question about that, along with the neoliberalism. It's like a cancer. So these things are all bad for society, and they need to be reined in somehow.
Dr. LaRouche, do you think this is all decided by the shareholder values? Like, do those social media platforms, do they have an incentive to let those extremist content to remain on their platforms as long as it's profitable?
Well, I think it's you have the control of the Western world right now. I would say by three groupings. One is Wall Street, the other one is the City of London, and maybe the third one is Silicon Valley. And I would differentiate between those people who are in this just for the profit. I mean, there are many, many people who think speculation is a good thing, and just to make maximum profit is good. And I think that is ruining society. I agree with Mr. Cavallo on that completely. But I think there is a different level. The people behind that are what is the oligarchy. And the oligarchy is that group of people who believe that the world should be run as an empire. My late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, used to call the empire a slime mold. He said that it's a slime mold which changes its color, it changes its form, but it remains a slime mold, So the empire, from the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Venice Empire, the Dutch Anglo Empire, and nowadays the British Empire, which has taken over the institutions of the United States, it remains the same idea. And they are playing the geopolitical game, try to contain the rise of China, to try to encircle Russia. And many of these so-called social movements are not genuine movements, but they are being manipulated. Like, for example, if you look at the storming of the Capitol on January 6th, there is now coming out lots of evidence that the FBI had information about right-wing violence being planned many days before it happened. They even tried to block certain groups from entering Washington. So then the big question is, why was there no security? The United States has a military budget which is 10 times that of the 10 following countries behind. And they should not be able to protect their capital when it is known that the January 6th would be a big day, when there was indications about violence being planned, and then there is no security. So the big question is, was this whole thing a setup? They knew that for Trump this would be an important day, but this was also a way of instrumentalizing what they knew was in place in order to get rid of Trump and the Trump movement. And this is 75 million people who voted for Trump. So, I think that one has to differentiate between the use of such movements and, they have an own existence, but they're being instrumentalized by the intelligence services, and I think that will come out. I'm convinced it will come out about the January 6th, because this is a watershed day.
Yeah, and Mr. Chen, and then Trump has 70 million voters. If we think about the closeness of the voting results, what do you think would happen if the social media platforms, if it failed to keep the trust of nearly half of the America's population?
Well, I think it's very dangerous to me. I mean, it's already a very divisive country. And, I remember every time, it's not just Trump's 4 years. I remember, I was in and out. I mean, spent like 11 years in the U.S. in the last 20 years. And so every time I was there, people telling me, Chen, you are not here for the good time of American democracy. And the trouble is, partisanship is getting worse. I mean, now. So then 10 years ago, I was there, or, 5 years ago, I was there. So I think you need actually, the social media, the big tech, I mean, we all agree, I mean, earlier that it's more sort of left-leaning or leaning towards the Democrats, should be regulated. I mean, should be more balanced. I mean, should be better regulation. It's not in favor of one party group or the other. So it should, it should uphold freedom of speech, but in a way that is regulated and there's no extremism allowed. So I would say if this is not dealt with well, I mean, you would see, obviously it's not easy for the Trump supporters to start a big tech company, very quickly. But in the long term, you will see that probably, and the apps, it will inflame the, fire, I would say, further.
Right, and Mr. Cavallo, and then you believe that Twitter was doing absolutely the right decision to ban Donald Trump. But we all know the root cause here is a political extremism. So will the deplatforming of Donald Trump make the far-right groups radicalize even further?
Yes, it will. It's gonna anger them more, and that's definitely a major concern. I mean, anything you do to, and this speaks to what Professor LaRouche is saying, that we're seeing now that because again, I'm no favor. I'm no lover of either party. I see what's happening in America. I blame both sides. This began 20 years ago, 20 to 30 years ago, post Reagan. And that's why Trump was elected in the first place, because both parties have let the country, excuse me to say, go to hell a bit, and terribly so. And so on the left, we see now that they are making this effort to, number one, ostracize Trump. Well, after what happened, I think he deserves it. They're really ostracizing him. But to the degree that they're now making a power play and doing more and more and more of what it is the Democrat side shouldn't be doing, it's very dangerous. It is happening. We see it happening. And I certainly don't agree with it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you, Mr. Mario Communications Group. He is also a senior fellow with the Center for China and Globalization. And Dr. Ms. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, founder of the Schiller Institute, a Germany-based political and economic think tank. And thank you as well, Chen Weihua, China Daily's EU Bureau Chief based in Brussels. Thank you all for joining our discussion this evening. And that's all the time we have for this edition of World Today. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. And for further discussion, please follow us on Twitter. It's China Plus News. I'm Jialing. Thank you so much for listening.
You're listening to China Plus Radio, connecting you with China and the world.
，Alpha News，I'm Wenjin。